Yes, yes, yes. We're back again, Research Rebels. Welcome, welcome. So first off, I want to say this: welcome everyone. Before we get started with our guest, Mr. Taharka, follow Research Rebels on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and please like, repost, share with all your friends. At least 10 followers. All right, share with at least 10 followers. Make sure we get them in here to get this information from this good brother. All right, and if you're watching us on TikTok live, tap the screen, share, hit the share button. Like I said, repost to your stories and send it to at least 10 people that you know can benefit from this information that we have. All right, so let's get into it. My big sis Tika gonna take over.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Shaka. Today we have Professor Dr. Taharka Day, and we just want to go ahead and introduce him. We're honored to be joined by him. He's an assistant professor in the Department of Africana Studies at San Diego State University. Dr. Ade is a historian, an Africologist, where and whose work centers on African and African diaspora history, African ways of knowing, and traditions of resistance. They're often, um, okay, I do apologize, they are too often marginalized and misunderstood. His scholarship engages deeply with the Black political thought, particularly the work of W.E.B. Du Bois, and connects historical analysis to contemporary global issues, from identity consciousness to imperialism and the ongoing struggles facing Africa and the diaspora. And its diaspora, sorry. We're excited to have him with us today and have him engage in this beautiful conversation that we're going to have to kick off Black History Month, of course. We're also going to talk about the challenges and also conventional narratives, as well as deepen our understanding of the past and helps us to connect with all the future that we're working toward as well. So I want to thank you, Dr. Ade, for being here. A great way to kick off Black History Month, of course, and with you. And we're glad that you're here with us today. So our very first question for you is just stemming around the foundations of Africa, African history, and some misconceptions that people may have about it, right? The first question for you is from your experience teaching African and African diaspora studies, what are the most persistent misconceptions people hold about African history, the African continent, and African peoples, especially those that emerged or hardened after the transatlantic slave trade?
Taharka, you hear Tika? Still no sound?
Still no sound.
All right. So
Checking TikTok as well. There's no sound there either.
all right, Tika, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
All right, so he can't hear you. So she asked your first question. So let me make sure that we're good on TikTok as well. Can you guys hear on TikTok? It says no sound, and Taharka can hear me. I don't know if okay. So
I
they
can
said
hear you, Shaka, but
all right.
I can't hear.
But she asked, so if we
Can
can
you
get
can
Tika
you
sound,
can you guys hear me now?
he still can't hear you because he's not responding. So
Okay,
what
I
Tika
can.
asked was the first question from your experience teaching African and African diaspora studies. What are the most persistent misconceptions people hold about African history, the African continent, and African peoples, especially those that emerged or hardened after the transatlantic slave trade? That was the first question.
Yeah, I would say that persistently Africa is viewed as something that is ahistorical, something that no real history occurred other than the history that occurred when Europeans landed there. And many people don't always frame it that way, right? But once you start to listen to the way that they discuss their idea of Africa and African people and African history, uh, that those are the kinds, it usually leads to that kind of thought process that, that Africa is without history until European intervention.
Got you, got you. I like that. All right, Tika. Let's see if we got another, got our sound back. Tika, testing. You got? Can you hear? Can we hear you?
Okay,
Or
yeah, I can hear
Taharka
you.
can't hear her?
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Still
Oh,
can hear Tika.
maybe that time. Say something else, Tika.
Oh, Dr. Day, are you able to hear me
Yeah,
now?
no, nothing.
No, still nothing. All right, so
Okay.
number two. I'll go to number two, Tika, until we get you back. Why is it so
Okay.
important from an Africological perspective to challenge the idea that African history begins with enslavement rather than with complex civilizations, philosophies, sciences, and systems of governance?
I would say because centering pre-enslavement history in Africa, it restores agency. It restores the complexity of Africans and African history. Um, it restores the full record of African civilization. Slavery, or the period of enslavement, the transatlantic slave trade, the Ma'afa, if you will, is very recent on the historical timeline. So targeting just that period forward is in itself ahistorical.
Got you.
Yeah.
So, number three, some people believe that enslaved Africans were actually Hebrew Hebrew Israelites. What does the historical evidence tell us about the claim or that claim? Taharka, you know I laugh. I'm trying I'm trying my best. Like we do this on TikTok on an everyday basis. Okay, once again, some people believe that enslaved Africans were actually Hebrew Israelites. What does historical evidence tell us about their claim?
That is nonsensical. Historical evidence shows us that West Africans did not come from the Levant region. It's just that simple. And even if you look at the so-called or if you look at the what you could call biblical evidence, or if you look into the biblical literature and you really have an understanding of what's being discussed there, this idea of the world in the minds of the people that are writing that literature at that time did not include West Africa. It didn't include the Americas. It didn't include anything except for the world as they knew it. So this idea of people in West Africa uh, being from the Levant region, it doesn't hold up in that text or in the historical record.
Too far away. Like, we need to get on a boat, a plane, or something. It's too far away. All right, one more time. Let's check see with my sister here because we need her. We need her bars.
Okay, no problem. Did Africans
Yeah,
really
still not
sell
hearing Tika.
Still no sound, Tigger.
no
We
sound
can't
from
hear.
me? Okay. Well, I'll
Yeah.
go ahead and do
I
as
did
I'll
hear the
drop
sound
from
return
that.
on TikTok though.
Okay.
So
Maybe drop down, Tigger, and try to come back, see what we can get.
No problem.
All right. Number
Okay.
four. I appreciate that striping out too. Number four. Did Africans really sell their own people, or is that a misunderstanding of how the transatlantic slave trade actually functioned?
I think it's more accurate to say that a violent global market um, uh, spawned by European power is what produced African captives, not that Africans sold their own people. And that's just the very, you know, surface way of explaining that for it to be clear for people. But to be even more detailed and even more clear is that Africans didn't view each other at that time as all the same people, right? Many Africans today don't view each other as all the same people. There was no concept of that. And so people were selling, or forced to capture by way of their monarchs, people in, you know, rivaling clans, people in places that was maybe next door to them, but not considered their own people, right? And I don't mean next door as in literally next door. I mean, another tribe, another
Neighboring
kingdom,
communities.
neighboring communities, and
Yeah.
usually ones that are that are rivals to them, right? They were not, just taking the people in their home and selling them. That's misconception,
Thank you. We need to
a
clear
gross
that
lie.
up. We need to clear that up for the most. Ugh. All right. So next section: African resistance before and during the slave trade. How did African communities organize military resistance against European slave traders and rival African groups involved in slave raids?
Uh, well, they use fortifications to defend themselves. They um, use diplomacy between each other as well as between Europeans. There were counter raids. It was a lot of strategic warfare in order to resist raiders and traders on the part of largely the uh, people that were not in the monarchy, but even people who were rulers, took up arms against this horrific system as well.
Gotcha. To what extent did African individuals, families, and communities attempt to recover relatives who had been abandoned or sold into slavery, and what obstacles limited those efforts?
I think there's countless stories. I think there's stories that we would just never know about. Countless ones. I mean, just imagine your own family today. If someone was kidnapped in the middle of the night, would you not look for them? If you watched it happen, would you not fight back? We have the stories that are documented in the ledgers of slave captives, and things of that nature. But uh, there are countless untold stories of people trying to get their family back.
Absolutely. I
Absolutely.
mean, the rebellion, the resistance is countless. Let's just try it one more time. Take it. We got you. See if you guys can hear one
Yeah.
another.
Okay.
Yep, I
There we
can hear
go.
you.
We on.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, big.
Wonderful. Now, okay. So, what question are we on? We're on number
Number
7
7.
now.
Yes.
Okay. What forms of resistance did captured Africans employ during the um, marches to the coast and imprisonment in the slave fortresses? That was from Emma.
Oh, I mean, there were countless escape attempts,
Mhm.
what you would call slowdowns, things to make sure that, you're literally slowing down the march um, in the hopes that, somebody, family would find you, or your village would come and, raid what's going on and free you. Um, so they were trying to sabotage it. There were hunger strikes, um, because they need you to remain, ideally, that you would think that they would need you to remain in good health, or not dead, right?
Mhm.
So there was all kinds of things. There was also collective defiance, right?
Yeah.
People who you know whispered to each other and made sure that they could fight each other. That's why the system itself had to evolve to incorporate things like making sure that people from the same tribe or the same ethnic group weren't in chains next to each other, and all kinds of things, because they were trying to make sure you couldn't communicate and you couldn't fight back collectively,
Thank you
or at
for
least not
that.
efficiently.
Mm. I want to ask you a sidebar question.
Hmm.
Um, and during the Mahafa, um, the march to the coast, do we even have a number? We know that 12 million were trafficked in,
Hmm.
but do we even have a number for the amount of people who perished during that particular point in time?
There's been people who've tried to put a number on it, um, and I just no, there's countless people who perished. You got to even think about the people who were not being captured, but were trying to, get back their loved ones or just fight against it, and they are killed at the coast. That kind of thing. Um, there's countless things like that. The villages that are raided, right, during this time, and many people, particularly the elderly, and maybe even just um, people that they deem for whatever reason that they couldn't see a way to sell them. Maybe people who had ailments or maimed, or whatever the case may be, were just killed off, so that
Mm.
uh, people wouldn't know what direction they went in. Just people killed off so that information wouldn't get out. So there's countless um, people that we'll never know what the number is.
Thank you, Dr. Ade. Um, I'll go ahead and ask number 8 as well, Shock, if you don't mind. Um, Now, this is important. How common were revolts aboard slave ships? And what strategies did Africans use to try and take control of these vessels?
They were common enough that they worried traders. Worried them to the degree that there was insurance taken out on boats, right? And that was one of the reasons why insurance was. It wasn't just if the quote unquote cargo, the human cargo, uh, got sick or all died or whatever the case may be. It was also the worry of an uprising, and if the captain was able to make it back from that uprising and show proof, which I don't even know if what kind of proof would have to be shown, but the point is they would take out insurance to make sure that uh, they were compensated for what they went through. So those kinds of things, lets you know that this had to be a very common thing, right? And you know, people would rely on, especially in the very early times where you had a lot of people who might have been able to speak close to the same language or the same language or whatever. They would rely on timing, coordination. They would, figure out ways to get weapons. Some of them were smart enough to, watch how weapons were used, um, it- guns in particular, and try to use them. May not have been successful, but try to use them. And then you even have ones that try to steer ships, back to shore, or if they were out further enough, so I mean, there was a lot of different ways that resistance was employed.
Thank you, Dr. Ade. And I like the fact that you included the insurance aspect
Hmm.
because you know how much people like to say it never happened. Well, they've got receipts. All right. So
Absolutely.
number 9 is how and why were enslaved Africans transported between different regions of the Americas before um eventually, being brought to what is now the United States. So yeah, I guess they're trying to, this question is about how enslaved people were transported, between different regions of the Americas. So because this question is going to speak to one of the things that we talk about on panels all the time, which is the interconnectedness of
Hmm.
Afro Caribbeans, Afro Latinos, and African Americans. How being in different regions and being seasoned in certain places,
Hmm.
you do have ancestral ties to not only Africa but the Caribbean and other places as well.
Hmm.
So
Well, many times it was the maximized profit, right? So when you're seasoned in a place, you're essentially being socialized in such a way to make you a good slave, right? And if that was unsuccessful, that was unsuccessful for whatever reason. But then you were sold or resold across the colonies, and this maximized profit for people. You would be bought at one price when you're stolen from the continent, and then once you make it to one of these hubs to be seasoned, then you were sold for a much larger price, um, and generally people are asking questions like how is this person trained. It was almost like selling a puppy, right? That's
mm,
how they viewed it. It was like selling cattle. How well, how healthy is the person that's enslaved, what kind of skills do they have, are or do they behave? Those kinds of things. And how strong are they? All those kinds of things went into the price. Their sex, all of that went into the price. So yeah, to maximize profit.
You know, explaining this to people, I always tell folks that it's like buying a horse, and I
Hmm.
hate to put our ancestors in that category, but is it better to buy one that is wild or one that's already been broken?
Hmm.
And I think that you just explained why it was the latter. So thank you. I don't know, Shaka, if you
Absolutely.
want to go ahead
Yeah,
with the next question.
I thought you was gonna go into your horse example that you always do. You know, I was waiting on it. She has, man, she had a
Well,
horse.
I thought you guys were going to go into the you kind of alluded to it earlier, the
Mhm.
conversations we have about, the interconnectivity, between all of us because of this process of being
Oh,
traded. Yeah.
Expound, bro. Go ahead, do it at any
go
time.
ahead.
Expound, but we,
You
hey,
can
this ain't
you can
no.
add lib. We wanted to, what I'm saying, include a lot of questions, but of course, go
Our
ahead.
history will always be fun, brother. And you can
Hmm.
expound. Take it, man. This
Yeah,
is your
no,
time.
no, no. It's
Hmm.
I wasn't going to say much unless you had like a lot of questions about it. But I mean, other than that kind of dispels that notion, right? Like people were brought to particular hubs, and then from those hubs, and it wasn't always that someone was brought to a hub and then 6 months later they were sold, right? A lot
Mm,
of the times they could be sitting there for a generation, have
mm,
kids, that kind of thing, and then they're sold. And so you will have connections, you might be sold to, let's say, the Carolinas. And so you would have connections to people in Jamaica, right?
mm.
Or to people in Guadeloupe or whatever, because of because of that seasoning process.
Absolutely.
Even so, I don't want to, go off because we do have a time frame, but I want to make this point.
Hmm.
Barclays, the Barclays Center,
Hmm.
um, they were Quakers, and one of the brothers had a plantation in Jamaica, and he, because of I guess conscience or whatever, he wanted to free all his enslaved people. So he took all of them to Philadelphia,
Mm.
every last single one of them to Philadelphia. And those people that were culturalized in Jamaica were transported to Philadelphia. Some of them perished, of course, because of everything. But he brought them there because there were a lot of mutual aid societies for freed, enslaved, formerly enslaved people. So that's one of the caveats. It was many different ways in which people were, exchanged back and forth. So I'm glad that you alluded to that because a lot of people just say, "Oh, these people were Africans," and no, there were people. They were, like you stated, for a generation or two before they were sold off into different regions of the Americas as well. So thank you for clarifying that. Um,
Okay.
Monsieur Shaka, go ahead.
We're going into a new pair, a third section:
Mhm,
enslavement, humanity, and social bonds. So,
mhm.
this question is from Mystica. Matter of fact, do the honors. That's yours. You can take that one.
Okay, no problem. You often emphasize the humanity of enslaved Africans, particularly the sacred bonds of family and kinship. Why is it critical to teach slavery not only as an economic system, but as a systematic assault on African social, emotional, and spiritual life?
Yeah, because it wasn't just a system of labor extraction. It was a lot of what slavery was an intentional assault on African cosmological concepts of kinship, of spirit, of personhood, that kind of thing. And it had to be intentional because they had to uh, it, break you down essentially to make you a good slave. right? And to ensure that your, you know, whatever children that you have, they get that type of socialization and not, you know, the one that you brought with you from Africa, even though they failed in many regards, because we passed on, we have passed on to us, in the Americas, you know, so much of African vestige, but that was the thing. Like you had to, um, or they had to, to ensure that you become a good slave. They had to socialize you, in that socialization process. Um, it was to strip you from so much of what you conceived about yourself, about the world, how you perceived just about everything in social and people activity. Um, and so, that was like, that's the huge uh, challenge in my mind. You know, we talk a lot about social justice, right, in the United States. And I often tell people that my research really looks at what I call cultural justice. How do we uh, how do we repair what was broken culturally? It will never be the same again, right? Just as if nothing had occurred, what happens today wouldn't be the exact same as 200 years ago, even if the slave trade never occurred, right? So it would never be the same. But what of the past that we can look at and say, hey, um, we want to restore that because it fulfills a need in our social cultural lives as people of African descent. Things that we still hold on to in vestige and still do, that we don't understand why, and that we're in a cultural war with others over, and we can't fully explain, you know, why we do it this way or why we view the world this way. We can look back and say, okay, let's restore not only that understanding, but, you know, the practice itself to fit our modern need.
As Tika always says, cultural continuity, culture carries.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That next one's yours, Tika. You can do the honors of that one as well. I'll do the midway.
Okay, no
If
problem.
you want
No
to do it, I'll take it, but that's yours.
I'll roll with it. I'll roll with it. Yeah. Do you see the legacy of forced separation between families, communities, and even continents continuing to shape relationships among African descended people today? Right. Um, Especially across the continental diasporic divide. And I think that brokenness is what you're referring to.
Hmm.
Um, oftentimes, because I think Chuck and I, we were on the panel yesterday, and woo,
Ooh,
woo, um,
man.
man,
Well,
it
you
is,
know,
yeah.
it
Go
you
ahead,
mentioned the
Tara.
panels. I think a lot of this, or this caused a lot of the identity crises we see in not only the African diaspora community, but also in Africa. So the
Mm,
development of the Hebrew Israelite ideology, the development in the United States of, where I think Shaka, you might have been the first person I heard call them pretendians. Um, you know, but the people that, you know, claim to be Native Americans, and they
mhm.
are, you know, obviously not, you know, that kind of thing. I think that has led to, not that people don't have identity crisis based off of other, you know, historical factors, but I think that's led to the bulk of it, right?
Yeah,
Because of the because of colonialism in West Africa and how that shaped, you see it there, but because of the slave trade, and, you know, you see it here as well.
Absolutely. Real quick, guys, let me get you guys' attention one more time. A quick commercial break. If you're enjoying this live, enjoying this conversation, make sure you follow Research Rebels on Instagram. We have an Instagram page as well as on TikTok. If you're already on TikTok, I understand that. Share it out. You keep sharing, share it to somebody you haven't shared it to. YouTube, we have a YouTube channel. We're streaming live on YouTube right now. And please like, repost, share with all your friends. Okay. Also, make sure that you follow our guests. Follow our guests. Stark, you want to plug your social media real quick, brother?
Yeah, on TikTok, I'm Taharka.ade. So, spelled the way you see it right here under my book, Taharka.ade. And that's just a handle on TikTok. On Instagram, it's the same thing. Don't really do Facebook. Um, but yeah, those are the two social medias that I commonly use.
All right, perfect. Appreciate it. All right, so next section: resistance as a core tradition in the African diaspora. Why must resistance and rebellion through figures such as Zumbi Zumbi of Polaris? I don't know I'm pronouncing that. I pronounce it.
Palmaris.
Natty of the Maroons, Uso of Barbados, Nat Turner be taught as central to African diaspora history rather than treated as isolated or exceptional moments. That's from my big sis Tika.
Every school child, well, I mean, I don't know how poor the state of American education is today, but when I was growing up, every school child heard about Patrick Henry, right? You heard about George Washington, and the what they did for the United States. How they felt that these are inspirational figures. That's the reason why you learn about them. And these are figures for people to look up to. We're always talking about these quote unquote founding fathers, right, in the United States. And these are things that happened, centuries ago, but they remain as foundational things to look up to, or people to look up to, and ideals to look up to, for quote unquote Americans, right? Um, that is no different than looking at people like Zumbi or Nanny of the Maroons, Nat Turner, and others as ideologically people that we look up to, we see as those who were trying to gain liberation for us, trying to gain uh, freedom, a sense of respect, a sense of agency, things of that nature for people of African descent, and that's necessary because it in the minds of people, it ensures that you feel valued, that there's a long intellectual history and a long cultural history of people who valued you even though they didn't know you, right?
Yeah.
Valued what it means to be of African descent, valued what it means to be free as a quote unquote race, whatever you might conceptualize that as. And so those are important. It's also important, I think, and I was mentioning this to someone the other day, not only, those types of stories, but our mythoforms that we have in the United States that mirror those stories. So stuff like Brer Rabbit or our versions of Anansi, um, Shine and Stagger Lee and High John the Conqueror. These stories that are for African Americans was central and foundational folklore that gave inspiration to people and then pulled off of the ideas of many of these very people that we just mentioned, Nat Turner especially, and VC and others, right? Um, that's important. That type of, if I dare say, propaganda for our community is very important as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the ways we can empower our youth. Um, Too many people are trapped in this idea of slavery as the folks in the field, and it's like, no, they were doing much more than that. They were actively fighting to free themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the reasons why we have such an estrangement. So many people want to just be estranged from Africa, but they're not understanding that your ancestors were fighting the entire time.
Hmm.
and may not be, even through rebellion, but also through passive ways,
Hmm.
poisoning,
Yeah, absolutely.
you
But
know.
I think at the core of it, it will show people and young people especially that resistance is the norm, not the exception, right? That you should always resist assaults on your agency, your autonomy, your your corporeal, right? You should resist any type of assault on that.
and work together. Like the myth of the little sidebar, like the myth of the house slave and the field slave, feeling that the narrative that was pushed from Europeans, the British, that the house slave was working against the field slave, whereas there, I have in my documents, I have at least, or my notes, I have at least 12 cases where it's proven and documented that the house slave was helping, poisoning the master, giving information to the field slaves. You know what I mean? So just like
Hmm.
Marcus Garvey said, once black people understand their glorious past, they'll be more inclined to respect themselves. So 100%,
Hmm.
100% agree.
Absolutely, absolutely.
My bad. Go ahead, to you.
No, that's fine, that's fine. So we are at an impasse, or we're at number.
Oh,
Wow,
two.
we're moving through these questions rather quickly. Um, so how can teaching young people about these resistance movements help cultivate political consciousness, empowerment, and a sense of responsibility among future Black leaders? And I think you kind of partially answered it, but I want you to maybe go a little bit more in depth. Like,
It
I
gives
would.
young people
Mhm.
it gives young people a usable tradition, right? Something that that they're not reinventing the wheel of what our tradition is. And so it's a usable tradition of strategy, of courage, responsibility. It's not just reinforcing trauma. It's how do we use our tradition of fighting against um, all forms of assault on our autonomy. How do we use that tradition um, today and in the future? It gives people a usable tradition.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay.
Section 5, Du Bois Consciousness and Intellectual Debates. This is from my brother Teaching on the Move.
Mm.
How should we properly understand W.E.B. Du Bois' concept of double consciousness beyond the simplified versions that are often taught today?
You know, Du Bois was referring to, in my estimation, this kind of like this lived tension of selfhood under the measuring gaze. Um, it wasn't simply two identities. And the interesting thing about um, Du Bois or this whole thing of double consciousness, I have yet to find where he wrote that more than once. He published it twice, right? When he published an article, and then he publishes The Soul of Black Folk, and he basically reuses the information from that article, and you see that same passage there where he talks about a double consciousness. But he doesn't really, you don't see that phrase again in any of his literature from that point forward. Du Bois was, when he first wrote those words, he wasn't even 30 years old.
Hmm.
It's the other thing. Um, and so, when we hear of Du Bois, most people bring up double consciousness, but imagine living to the age of 95, and the thing that people talk about the most as it comes to you is something you wrote when you were 30, and didn't put those two words together in no other time in your life, right? um, where's the attention to my intellectual growth, the things that at near the end of my life or at the end of my life I found to be most valuable and most important. And that's the thing we should consider as it comes to Du Bois. But even in that time, um, I don't think double consciousness or his intention was it to be as simple as you're living these two identities.
Gotcha. All right. So in today's social media driven world, this is also from teaching. In today's social media driven world, do you think double consciousness has evolved, intensified, or taken on new forms?
Um, I don't know about evolved. I think it's definitely maybe intensified, or it's you're seeing it more in a visual way because of social media. You're seeing it played out in different ways. There's more performance. There's more, those kinds of things. Um, and I guess to some degree you can call it double consciousness uh, because of the type of performance that you have to put on social media. It's usually saturated with the subjectivities of the West, right? The what you think the Western gaze or the European gaze would view as more attractive or more valuable, or etc., in order for you to get more views and more traction and that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas in your normal everyday life, you might not talk a certain way or say a certain thing a certain way or whatever the case may be. Um, so I think it's intensified by due to so many of the same factors that a lot of things are intensified on social media. But I don't know about like an evolution of sorts.
Mm, okay.
You got the
Is it
next one? Yeah, 16.
I want to get in on this W.E.B. Du Bois talk. So how does double consciousness help us understand contemporary identity struggles across the African diaspora? And that's another one from teaching as well.
I think it can explain like why identity can feel like negotiation um, between your own community truth and the external policing from our external communities of what your truth is and what the way you view the world and things of that nature. And I
Mm,
and I think it can explain that sense of negotiation across the diaspora. Um, and this kind of it shouldn't be normal that you have to negotiate your identity, right?
mm,
But it's like it's normal to us, and that's very problematic. But I don't think that people view it or understand to see it that way. That's what's happening. That we're always in this position to negotiate our identity. So I think double consciousness can definitely explain that.
yeah. The poem "We Wear the Mask."
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
very much so. Into this that particular question, and that is so true. That as an individual, I think that within your blackness, you sometimes you can navigate so many different waters, and it's,
Hmm.
I mean, just to get by, you gotta
Hmm.
navigate. I mean, we're basically talking about code switching.
Hmm.
That's what people, if people in the audience may not understand what double consciousness, it's basically code switching, and having to navigate a certain portion of your life in a certain way in order for you to be a part of quote unquote larger society. So let me get into number 17.
All right.
Many people reduce Dr. Oh, I'm sorry, Du Bois. I do apologize.
Mhm.
That's why I got the glasses on. um, Many people reduce Du Bois Booker T. Washington debate to education versus trades.
Mhm.
Mm. What did that debate actually represent at a deeper ideological level? And that's another one from Teaching on the Move.
Mhm.
Great questions, Teaching.
I mean, what you saw between Booker T. Washington and Du Bois? I mean, here are two people who were college educated. Um, Washington only got to a certain degree of college education, right? Um, and he definitely valued trade. He thought that that would be what would be best for African Americans. Perhaps he thought he was being prudent in thinking that not all people of African descent are going to go to college and have or be able to make a living off of um, the type of education that Du Bois um, valued, or at least what he perceived that Du Bois valued. And so, but they both valued education, right? Um, Going to or getting a trade, that was for Booker T. Washington also a type of education. Um, so that's why he created Tuskegee in the way that he created Tuskegee University, where he taught students uh, trades, brick making, and several different things. But um, I think the conversation about Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, ultimately we needed both, right? There's not no and or for me. Um, and a lot of people tend to think that this is where they fell out, that Booker T. Washington and Du Bois fell out, and that's not true. They continued to work together for quite a while after this. Um, what the falling out between Booker T. Washington and Du Bois was something a bit more messier than this. It had to do with Booker T. Washington paying the black press to say things about to kind of exaggerate things about Tuskegee and about what he was doing in order to push Tuskegee's name out there more. And Du Bois found out about it and had a field day with him about it, and then you start to see the communications between them drop off.
Yeah,
But it wasn't, the blow up that people make it out to be. At least what I can infer from the record. The real ugly type of debates that were happening was, if you were to say that something like ugly debate was between Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. Uh, if you just look at the records between them. But yeah, both was necessary. It's not this, and teaching is right to point that out. It's not just this simple, education versus trade thing. It's not that Du Bois didn't value trade either, but it's that he felt you had to have certain types of education that will allow you to not be exploited with this trade skill that you have, right? Um, and that was part of the issue.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Next section: African philosophy, time, and future. What is that? What in the world?
Futurism,
No, not
Futurity.
futurism.
Futurity.
or
Futurity.
futurity.
I've never
Okay.
seen it spelled like that before. Goodness gracious! All right. How do African philosophies of the time differ from the dominant European linear model, and in what ways might that European concept of time be limited to African and African descendant people? That's from Tika.
Can be limiting for. Um, because African concept of time, and I'll say many, right? African concepts of time, and I say this because I'm thinking of the great debates between John Mbidi and um, Getchie and others. I butchered his name. I know it's pronounced differently, but um, where they argue there's overlaps between East and West Africa, but there's of course differences and things too. But I'll say that many African time philosophies, they treat the past as something that's active. The past is something that's active and present. It's not something that is just that happened then and this is what's happening now, right? um so it's something that is cyclical, right? Not linear.
Mm-hmm.
And linear time in many of these conceptions of time for African people can trap us in many progress myths. So the idea of modernity, for example, or post-modernity, if you've heard those terms before, or post-structuralism, those kinds of things um, that relate to the idea of what is progress, um, becomes problematic for people that may view progress in different ways. Your ideas of progress becomes very Eurocentric and very linear, and progress for different people can look like restoring things that have that existed before and that were destroyed, or or that the present itself and the past is so interconnected that to talk about progress sometimes becomes futile, right? Or to talk about what is modern becomes futile. But those are concepts, those are ideas that are very culturally centered, that get maligned, that get erased, um, that get viewed as secondary um, when it comes to these Eurocentric subjectivities or the way they view time, that often uh, becomes the yardstick, the measurement for how time should be viewed, um, in a way that's seen as universal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're, even though it's their cultural subjectivities that is driving it, it's their cultural paradigms that is driving it. It's presented to the world in a way that this is just human ideas of time. It is presented in this very universal way, and so and that causes a lot of conflicts. John Mbidi talks a lot about how this notion of African time, or in United States you hear colored people time,
CP.
CP
Mm-hmm.
time,
Time.
how problematic that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because of the way just we culturally just view time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it said that nothing begins until everyone arrives,
Hmm.
and as opposed to you gotta be there on the dot, because we have to look at the culture of a people and how they impose restraints upon time. Like whenever I'm explaining these things, I always explain that geography has everything to do with this.
Hmm.
Because if you're living in a resource scarce place, you have to, time is of the essence, right? You're going to have a almost a fixation on things being done at a certain time, and
Hmm.
within capitalism as well, right? People who develop that system, things have to be done in a specific time in order for you to yield maximum profit, right?
Hmm.
So what happens to a people who have never ancestrally been within them type of time restraints and constriction? I often feel like our people, and not just our people, but most like indigenous people, have been on this trajectory that they would have never been on.
Mm-hmm.
And can you imagine a world that was more centered in the sense of time being cyclical and that you are interconnected with the past, the present, and the future?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, it thank you for expounding on that. Did you want to do the next one, Shock, or what's up? What you want to do? I can't hear you.
Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Shaka.
I bet I'm muted to make sure they have them. But yeah, I'm saying you can take it as yours, or I can get it. It's either or. It's a good question. I like it. I like your Afrofuturism.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. I do want to ask this. I'm sorry, Shaka.
I
You got
figured
the
you
next
did.
one though.
Nah, okay, I'm with it. I'm with it.
Okay. It says you connect African philosophies of time with Afrofuturism in your work.
Mm-hmm.
How does Afrofuturism function not merely as imagination, but as continuity? Okay, where the past actively informs vision of a liberated future,
Mm-hmm.
and can go because for me that's what I am thinking about the future of our people.
Mm-hmm.
It is one where I imagine us being a liberated people.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted you to talk about that because I know that you're very much into this topic, and I love Afrofuturism. I am obsessed.
You know, people get upset with me because if you read the works that I have written on Afrofuturism, I always challenge the term Afrofuturism itself.
Mm,
Um, so if you read um, Black to the Future by Mark Derry, the book chapter where the word Afrofuturism is coined in,
mhm,
back in the 90s. I can't remember if it was 98 or 92. I can't remember the exact year, but it's back in the 90s. So Mark Derry um, coins the term Afrofuturism. He's a white cultural critic, right? And he already starts off kind of problematic when he's coining the term because essentially he says, and I'm not quoting him directly, but he says something along the lines of how can a people who either don't have a past or don't have memory of their past conceive of a future, right?
mm,
And it's his way of trying to you know give props or give credit or uh, highlight Black people's imaginative or creative prowess to be able to do so. So he's trying to say this is a in a good light, right? But he's already starting off with a problematic position or proposition because um, the idea that we lost all of our past is
mm.
ahistorical,
Yeah.
right? There are things that we do that we might not have direct memory of, but we pass it down, and there are things uh, that we have been doing since the time of enslavement that we continue on as a past, right? As part of our past, but there's many things that we still hold on to that we do in vestige, um, and so I always said that was already a problematic position to have when he started that. Then the idea of future itself, and so if you start reading through these philosophers, these African philosophers, when they start talking about time, in BD, Jepche, and the others, they they conceptualize uh, or their conception of the future is, and they debate between them, what this means, but it's not the same as the linearity of the West, right? There's always this continuous conversation with the past and how active and present the past is with today as well as with whatever may come, Mbidi even goes into the language of societies and in East Africa, and say, they really didn't even have a word for future. They had words that meant, you know, a cycle, what should come because of what has been, right?
Mm.
What may happen within the next, day or two, or maybe a month or whatever, based off of what's happening today. But this idea of the future, they didn't really have. And people, some people find problem with it. They were like, oh no, you had to have an idea of the future. The future just wasn't, if you can overlap it, if you can conceptualize it, or if you can just try to find uh, a conceptual parallel, the future doesn't have to look like conceptually the future that the West thinks of.
Yeah.
Um, you This
Mm.
idea of what has happened before is the basis of what has to happen again. The cyclical idea, it's cyclical, but it has a continuance, a linearity in that sense as well, right?
Mhm.
But it's still cyclical because it's all based off of what is our traditions that will continue, um, even if it's not going to be exactly the same. And the understanding was always there. Nothing will ever be exactly the same. But what has happened before dictates what will happen again. That continues, right?
Mm.
And when you start looking at stories that way, uh, even in like Octavia Butler stuff and others, um, you start to really get a sense of, perhaps Afrofuturism is not a proper title, either. I don't know
Mhm.
what you should call it. Afrofuturism is such an attractive title, but
It
people like
is.
it.
It
You
is.
know, if you want to call it Afrotemporalism, whatever.
Mhm.
But it's that's just the way it is. And words have such meaning, have such power, they have such baggage and weight, and so and the reason so that's why I pick at just the word itself, because that conceptual baggage of Afrofuturism can shape how we view our futures in ways that does not have reverence for the African past, right?
Mhm.
And so you just really have to take that into consideration.
Yeah.
You know what? I think Afrofuturism ties into John Henry Clark and what he said. His quote. Um, he said, "History is not everything, but it's a starting point. History is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is a compass that, or compass they use to find themselves on the map of human geography. It tells them where they are, but more importantly, what they must be." And
Hmm.
with Afrofuturism and how it's explained, it plays a part because if you don't know the time of day that you're in, you don't know the history, both past and present, you can't plan for the future. You don't know, like you get people to talk about, oh, I want to do this, I want to liberate, I want to. You can't make any plans if you don't know what the future was and is today and where you are within that. So I like
Hmm.
that term too. That's a
Hmm.
cool name though.
It's a
It's
prime concept for a social scientist, because
yeah.
that you're always, I mean, as for me, I'm always thinking about the implications of what happened in past and present and what it means for us in the future, and
Hmm.
how we can kind of look at things that have been in the past as a
Hmm.
guide to how we can manipulate or move in the future as well. So
Hmm.
that's why I really wanted to ask that question. And I think intrinsically, a lot of our people who are writing or even producing content in this vein intrinsically tap into that.
Hmm.
There's a brother on here, Revision Studios.
Mm-hmm.
He does a lot of concept art, and he even does his own shorts. But what I often see with what he does is that the past is present in this future world that he's created. That even though this is a African black people in a far off planet, they have taken a lot. They still have rites of passage. They still do things that
Mm-hmm.
are African and linked to the past. So I just think that a lot of the artists that are working within this content, even though there's some issues with the name, but they are intrinsically doing a lot of that. So
Yeah,
you.
absolutely, absolutely. I think for me also, and I should have said this earlier. Part of what becomes the problem is that the name will always be associated with sci-fi, right?
Mm.
With science fiction.
Yeah.
Um, when in some regard, and I used to manage a bookstore, and so I know this kind of intimately. In some regard, it's going to be put in the sci-fi section, right? That's how people are going to conceptualize it. Oh, well, what is the closest, Western conception of what this is? Oh, it's sci-fi. So just put in sci-fi, and a lot of that will cause a lot of people, a lot of future writers, thinkers, to start conceptualizing this genre when it should exist on its own, have its own autonomy, have its own agency. They start conceptualizing it within the framework of work of sci-fi, and that to me
Mm.
becomes problematic, and that can be a problematic diffuse of what this genre, or several diffused issues, or diffused lineage of what the genre could be, juxtaposed to you know what it really could be. And what I think a lot of the Afrofuturist scholars, when you read their works, their scholarship on it, um, uh, Womack and others, what they really understand what this is, Reynaldo Anderson and others, that they really understand that this is a really, Afrocentric, um, project that should be protected in such a way that that it doesn't get confused and maligned as things like sci-fi. And I think the answer to that for me is you got to choose a different name. you
Mm.
you got to you got to choose a name that represents Africa, or the African diaspora, or whatever the case may be. um and a lot of people, when I say that to them, they might give me, well, people know what to associate this with, or it helps people to, oh, Afrofuturism, it's attractive, it's all this thing, and it'll be harder. And I'm like, well, just because something is easier doesn't always mean it's the best thing to do, right? You've gained a lot of traction. It's not like you can't still use the name. Malcolm X still used Malcolm X, and he used, Shabazz. Like it,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
can use the different, but you have to start getting people into the idea of this is something that is very different,
And
right?
much more than what is being presented about it. Actually,
Exactly.
great. I think Shaka, you can go ahead and segue into the next question, brother.
All right, all right. As a historian, how do you
Hmm.
respond to the idea that historians are trapped in the past when historical work is often deeply future oriented? It's kind of what we just talked about. Like there's
Hmm.
really that entire question. So, I mean, I feel we can expound on it more, but just as a historian with that thought process and people with what we see on social media, and what we talk about on social media, how you and I connected on social media, and we get these individuals who are stuck in this paradigm. What would you say to that? Like how do we mitigate that this thought process that why are you reading about the past? Like what do we do to mitigate that? What you think as historians?
Well, at first, brother, I have to split hairs with you. I'm not a historian. I'm an Africologist.
Mhm.
I like it.
Um, and the reason why I
Oh,
say that
that's
is
right.
because history has its own field, and I have, I'm a part of my own field and my own tradition. right? As someone who's, Africana studies through and through. My dissertation advisor and mentor was Malefikete Asante, or is Malefikete Asante, who that particular intellectual tradition within Africana studies, we call ourselves Africologists, right? So that's the first thing. But what I'll say to it, just to not throw your question out altogether or the baby out with the bathwater, is that uh, good history, good history is future work, right? Because good history clarifies choices, it exposes structures, and it expands what we imagine to be possible or imagine can be possible, right? If no one has a monopoly on history, and I think people say that, like, why do you study the past so much, or are you so trapped in the past? um, because it's almost like they have in their mind is that the past is just done with, that everyone knows what happened in the past, and staying in it is just you trapping yourself in some in the past. But understanding what has happened before, because we clearly don't, right, today, getting a good understanding of that in order to inform our present, and in order for our present to be so well informed that it can imagine proper futures for us,
Yeah.
right? Good history is future work, and that's bottom line.
If you don't plan, you're planning to fail. Period.
Absolutely.
Our next section, Tika, Du Bois and the Contemporary Global Movement.
You can go ahead and answer that one, Shaka.
Okay, this from you though. That's yours. You might, hey, look, this is one of your loaded ones. Let's get it. Come on.
Oh man, all right, no problem.
I like when you get
Um,
there.
it says your upcoming work on W.E.B. Du Bois and what you describe as the new scramble for Africa
Hmm.
speaks directly to our current global moment. How does Du Bois' analysis, of imperialism, capitalism, and race help us understand contemporary foreign intervention, resource extraction, and geopolitical competition on the African continent today? What lessons or warnings does his work offer African and African descended peoples moving forward?
Hey, real quick, can we put each one? Can we please put at the bottom the Berlin Conference, the Scramble for Africa? For those of you who don't know, I've heard two statements. I'm not going to repeat, and don't realize what the Scramble for Africa is and what it means. It's the Berlin Conference, 1884. If you guys don't mind, we can put that at the bottom of the screen. So when he talks about this, we definitely can get people doing some real good research, some good googling.
uh, what I'll say is that Du Bois helps us. It helps us read today's scramble for Africa, in or today's new scramble, as the same as it's always been, is racial capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Racial capitalism is imperialism. It's competition dressed up as development and security and humanitarianism, those kinds of things. Those are all of the masquerades for what it, all it really is. It's just, racial capitalism, imperialism, um, and and Du Bois very clearly, helps us see that in those last few chapters in his book, The World in Africa, um, which is largely what my book is. It's a critique, even though he had such foresight at that time. I'm critiquing a lot of even his own ideas, but I give praise to things that he said as well, in the world in Africa. Uh, uh, but it's a critique on European racial capitalism, on imperialism in Africa, and to some extent he does, to other parts of the world too. What's occurred because of capitalism and imperialism. Um, but he talks about this particular pattern of human culture that
Mm.
is in that has led the world to destruction, right? And he's talking about the West. He's talking about the European world. He's talking about America, that kind of thing. And he, is essentially, as it comes to Africa, showing that uh, in very insightful ways, he points out. Um, I'll give you an example. He talks about how these here you have African chiefs who have the finest of cloth, say like it's kente cloth or whatever the case may be, and they're selling it or trading it with Europeans for secondhand top hats and
Mm.
torn you know suits and things of that nature,
Mhm.
because Europe has made them think that that is more valuable, right?
Mm.
And he talks about how terrible that is. Um, and so, and Europe does the same thing on on the mineral level. They, hey, you need money, and we know that money is not valuable, it's the resources itself, but you need money. We're going to help you with financial resources. We're going to give you aid and all this kind of stuff, but
Mhm.
allow us to you know extract or work with you to extract, or whatever the case may be, these minerals out of the soil. Or Congo, you need us to get Rwanda off of your back, even though we're the ones that put Rwanda on your back in the first place. you
Mm.
know let
That-
us let us work with you, to make sure that happens. And but if you're going to do this, you're going to have to make sure that we have first rights and access to the minerals beneath your feet and things of that nature. um, it's all of this, security, development, humanitarianism, all this kind of stuff is dressed up. um, it's dressed up as that, but it's really just imperialism. And Du Bois gives a number of different examples um, like that, even in his time. And he talks about how the average white person today, not aware, you know, of the 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 horror that's happening in the African continent, or in
at
his day,
all,
I should say,
Mm.
at
that's
all.
not aware of the horrors that's happening in the African continent. And they see things or hear things. We call it poverty porn today, right?
Mhm.
They see or hear things that are just like, oh man, those people just can't get themselves together,
Uh,
you know. Um,
Man,
go.
man,
and they don't realize that it's because of you. It's because of uh, your
Greed.
unwilling.
Mhm.
Well, you're unwilling to be informed over how you benefit from what's happening in Africa,
Mhm.
and
right?
perpetuate, and perpetuate. Period.
And perpetuate. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That causes what's going on. It's your willingness to just be comfortable and to be, yeah, you're not sending the troops over. You're not maiming the people who are you know digging the diamonds out of the ground. You're not doing, yeah, you may not be doing all that stuff, but you are complicit
In
because
every
you
way.
benefit from it,
Yeah.
and you refuse to acknowledge your complicity.
Man.
um, you know, Even in that time, Du Bois points all that out, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, he certainly helps us understand that the art of imperialism, absolutely.
You know,
Imperial
I
colonialism.
was and just a quick sidebar. I was on TikTok, as I usually am, and I saw a Belgium comedian was, you know, asking the crowd, if they were aware of what Belgium did in Africa. And
Hmm.
one person answered, "Oh yeah, I was taught that we civilized them." And he's like, "How did you civilize them?" "Oh, we taught them how to eat with knives and forks."
Hmm.
So the guy goes on to say, like, okay, so you civilize them by teaching them how to eat with knives and forks. Well, the guy's like, "Oh, we tried to," and he's like, I wonder how they could eat with knives and forks when their hands were getting cut off
No limbs.
if they didn't meet their quota. And in Belgium, they were selling chocolate hands.
Hmm.
And I think it's still practiced today in some place. But either way, it goes to show the callous nature and how Western society has devalued the humanity of African people, and that is even on the continent and throughout the diaspora. You know what I'm saying? The As most Def put it, the length of black life is treated with short worth.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we are constantly in that struggle, and that's some of the things that tie us all together. But for some of us, we seem to ignore that factor, that what's happening in the Congo with children having to scrape cobalt is the same inhumanity that's happening here in the United States, where you can't walk in a neighborhood wearing a hoodie, at 10 o'clock at night. They're all interconnected, but no one sees that. But thank you for expounding upon that.
Absolutely.
The mining, if you will, also the the cocoa plants in Gambia for companies like Mars. A lot of people don't understand that those kids are still using how you say it, Tika, machete, to,
Mashia,
Shit.
Mashia.
to instead of going to school with books and pens and papers, they have a
Hmm.
machete, and they're making Mars richer.
Mm-hmm. I'll
Yeah.
Yeah,
make it easier for you. You can say cutlass.
cut the
Cutlass.
yeah, man. I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you 100%. I like that.
Yeah,
I like
absolutely.
that. So not a historian anymore. What are we?
Africologist.
I like that. I like
Yep,
that. A good one.
makes
I like that.
sense.
Well,
Okay.
I enjoyed you every bit of it, man, and the
Yeah,
knowledge
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
and what you bring to the table. I just want to say, first and foremost, to everybody listening, happy Black History Month around the globe. Of course, we have the shortest month here in America, February, when it comes to Black History Month, but it's Black History Day, Black History every day. Just get yourself well equipped with this thing right here, because if you like we said, that Afrofuturism, it starts today. It helps you. You learn once you learn history, you gather that information from the past, combine it with the updated information to or update that, use that history to update history today, and tell that historical time of day, like John Henry Clark says, and
Mhm.
we can become a better people. So I appreciate you, brother. Appreciate what you bring to the table.
Appreciate you guys having me. Absolutely.
Okay. Was that it, or don't we have a question left?
That was
One
it.
more? No,
Last one.
we
I
got
mean,
a
if we have
last
another, let's get into it. I don't want them to leave either. Yeah.
one. Oh, that's
If,
Taharka has to go.
no,
I
I'm
don't.
fine. If you have a closing question, ask it.
Okay. Hmm.
Or he said still one question left. Okay.
Yeah. If
Let me see.
African descended people fully embraced African ways of knowing, you know, our philosophies of time, okay, humanity, resistance, and
Mm.
future futurity, right? Futurity. Thank you.
Futurity.
Futurity. What do you believe becomes possible for us globally? And that was a question I wanted to ask you. If our people, if African descended people fully started to embrace African ways of knowing, right? And just basically our philosophies, our philosophies of time, humanity, resistance. Like,
Hmm.
what would that do for us, going forward as a people?
I think that inherently or inevitably, I should say, we'd unlock deeper unity. We'd have clearer purpose and more durable liberation struggles worldwide.
Mm,
Um, I think that's what it would do for us immediately. I mean, that would be the immediate results of us doing that.
Absolutely.
It would, a lot of this infighting and not really understanding, the work that must be done. We just
mm,
start doing the work. You know, I think that's what that would
Anti-intellectualism,
lead to.
the anti-intellectualism will disappear overnight.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
mm,
Um, and and I think the way to get there is, we need more people like, uh, what's brother's name, Ryan Coogler. You
oh
know,
yeah.
we need the propagandists, if you will. I mean, it's the reason why Garvey was able to build a movement of 2 million people, whatever the number that uh, that's the more liberal number, but 2 million
Six
people
million
worldwide.
dollars raised, no
You know,
social media.
yeah,
Mm,
that kind of thing. It's because he understood the power of propaganda, working at that press when he was in Jamaica, right?
mhm,
Um, and so we have to be able to do that. Nothing that beats people over the head with you're this or you have to be this. What it just subtly, these are the things that people choose to do within the stories that we put before them,
mm,
and it will socialize people. It will train them to understand um, our cultural and political time of day,
mm.
as Dr. Clark would
Absolutely.
say.
Like
Absolutely.
we don't have any we don't have any time for foolishness. Now, this is a time for us to actually move forward as a
Hmm.
people, as a group, and all this disunity is going to lead to our doom, if you will. And
Absolutely.
I'm an optimist. I'm always believing for the best, but I think our people have been trapped in some sort of negative propaganda. And like you said, we need people with the positive propaganda that's going to, teach about our philosophy, ways in which we understand time, ways in which we understand and respect each other's humanity. And I think that's going to be our way forward.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Thank you
Hmm.
so much for, um, having this conversation with us. We implore you to come back again, Taharka. And
Absolutely.
also, you can go ahead and plug what you do every Friday, which is, you have a wonderful panel right here on TikTok. So you can go ahead and talk about that, and your upcoming book, um, about Dr. E.B. Du Bois. And go ahead and then just inform the audience so that you can, get that support, brother.
Yeah, no, every Friday I host a live on TikTok. So 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I just talk about African history and African diasporic history. And and we have conversations, and we tend to okay, we just have conversations, and we tend to pull in what's happening today. We talked a little bit about what happened with Don Lemon.
Mm-hmm.
I think was Friday morning. As a matter of fact, I didn't know anything about it. I
Mm-hmm.
was in the live, and someone had to come in and tell me. And so we make these topics relevant. Um, and I do quite a few videos on African history, African diasporic history. Right now I'm going through the history of enslavement, but I'm going to start spreading out and doing other things as well with it. Yeah. Oh, and
Absolutely.
the book actually published back in 2023. So what you're seeing is a republish that's happening
Okay.
this month. As a matter of fact, it might be out today.
Mm-hmm.
The paperback republished, which is um, updated. I had to correct some things in it. So if you're gonna get it, get the paperback, and it's cheaper too.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. And that's his book, W.E.B. Du Bois.
And I will
And
make it a point to be there every Friday morning too. By the way, I'll come
Okay.
and
yeah.
make
Be
sure I
there.
do.
You're both moderators, so
Yes,
Oh,
yes, sir.
thank you.
yeah.
All
Okay.
right.
So, in closing, you got a ticket? You ready for
Oh
closing, right?
no, Shaka, do your thing. Do your thing,
And
brother.
my Tika voice, the elegant ads that we get every week. A huge thanks to Dr. Taharka Ade. Man, thank you for joining us again. As you can see, we support you, brother, and that's the reason why we've been coming to your lives. One of the most organized lives on TikTok. So I appreciate you, man, for joining us today and dropping those gems. Um, Afrofuturism, y'all need to go ahead and blow that term up. We need to, these terms that we've been creating on this here app and these apps, we need to create some terms that actually are um,
What
indicative of what we need to be and what we should be doing. And that's positive work to educate each other.
I like what he also suggested too. Afro temporalism. That's
All right, we got to be careful them tricky words. I had to. I'm sorry. I had they in the comments. I had to get them. You know them tricky words. Sometimes we get them.
okay.
They ain't tricky to
You
us. They
know
just tricky to them.
what I'm saying?
You sound
With
like
your fake
who was it
degree.
KRS-One or Grand Poopah that was talking about technology? Technology.
But so next week, guys, we have something in special in store for you guys. We're back another powerful conversation as well to sit down with Dr. Lakeisha David. Dr. Lakeisha David will be diving into her groundbreaking work, bold ideas, and the questions that challenge the status quo in research and beyond. So make sure you guys subscribe, turn those notifications on, hit that little thing, man, the little arrow on the side of your TikToks and all your backup pages, your G4 classified pages. Hit that little arrow and turn that, or that little bell in the top right hand corner, and turn that bell on so you guys know when we go live. All right, we don't want you scraggling in at the end. We want you to be here when we are giving you dropping these gems, because it's time to take it back, man. It's time to really get serious about our history, get serious about where we're going, like our Afrofuturism. What's the other word, Tika? What's the tricky word?
Afro temporalism.
Afrotemporalism. Okay, we need to make sure that you guys are in the know. So, Research Rebels, as we always do, bring you the real, factual history. No fluff, no misinformation. Everything that we speak of, you can actually go search it up with empirical, peer-reviewed studies.
Yep. We giving it to you straight, no chaser.
No chaser. All right. You guys enjoy and thank you for coming. Thank you for the likes. What did we get to today? 40,000. Hey, next time we need to get to 100,000. We need to do that. Out.
Out. Salute. Happy Black History Month.
Yes, ma'am. Boom, we off.
Are we out?
Yeah.
Are we? I don't
Yeah.
know.